Hello, good afternoon, good morning. My name is Chiara Benetti, and on behalf of ETA Florence Renewable Energies, I welcome you to today's webinar by NextGen World Fuels Project on hydrothermal liquefaction in the green energy transition. ETA Florence Renewable Energies is the technical organizer of the webinar and, of course, project partner of NextGen World Fuels. This is the first session on policy outlook and latest scientific technology advancement for HTL. This session will last until 3:15, and then we will have a second session starting at 3:45. During this session, we will have two Q&A sessions, and you will have the possibility to participate in the sessions by simply typing your questions in the Q&A tab that you can find at the bottom of your screen. You can type your questions whenever you like, from the beginning till the end of the session, and our speakers will have the opportunity to reply either by typing their replies directly in the Q&A tab or by replying live during the Q&A session. The webinar will be recorded, and the recording and the presentations will be available from tomorrow on NextGen World Fuels project website. From my side, that's all. I hope you all heard me well. And now I leave the floor to Preben Beer, the moderator of the session. Preben Beer is independent energy expert and former director of House of Energy Cluster Denmark. So Preben, the floor is yours, and thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you very much, and I would also like to say welcome to you all here. Just 1 year ago, January last year, I was also moderating an international workshop on new green fuels. Also, that theme had a 3-letter acronym. It was not HTL back then, it was PTX. Luckily, the transportation sector has so big challenges in transforming into green fuels that one of them is not enough. We need both PTX and HTL, and they have a lot of synergies, which I think that we will also get to touch today. My background, I've been more than 20 years in the energy sector, and 20 years ago, I actually started working on PTX and carbon capture and new biocrudes. Back then, we thought, well, 5-10 years from now, it will make a commercial breakthrough. Now, 20 years later, I believe in it more than back then. And indeed, we have seen a lot of scientific breakthroughs since then. And now we also see commercial activities starting to take off, maybe more in PTX as in HTL. But I believe that we will have in the next century here, in the next 10 years time, before 2030, we will have a lot of contribution from HTL to reach the ambitious targets that the European Union has on the energy transition with the use of HTL. And to start this afternoon's session, we'll first hear from the European Union, where Maria Giorgiato from DG Research and Innovation will start to introduce us to the European Union's RNI policy for renewable energy carriers. So Maria, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Preben, for the introduction. I will start now my presentation. All right. I will try to give you a little bit of the policy background, and particularly both the energy and climate policy and the research and innovation policy background that will affect now the bioenergy, biofuels, renewable energy careers, and all the renewable energy technologies that are associated with the HTL technology. First of all, the overall framework is the European Green Deal. The European Green Deal is a flagship program of the European Union now in the European Commission, and it is about how to become climate neutral by 2050, while protecting the human life and the ecosystem, cutting pollution, help the economic growth for the companies and the technology, and ensure that nobody is left behind. That is the just and inclusive transition. There's a lot of communication about this, and if we look closer, it affects all aspects of our life. It affects the energy, it affects the air, it affects the waste, the food, the agriculture, the packaging of the products, the health, of course, the cars, the mobility, all the transport, and the building sector. What is the role of the research and innovation? There, one of the problems of this initiative is how to fulfill the target of 55% cutting in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 from the 1990 levels. And this is to be done by stimulating competitiveness. So where the research and innovation policy in renewable energies and renewable fuel centers is exactly to reduce the carbon footprint in transport and in all the other sectors, of course. And also to lead international collaboration for cutting global emissions. In a nutshell, the policies and the strategies that are currently out under the European Green Deal and affect this area are the following most important ones, because there is a bunch of policies, but the most important are these. A strategy for the energy system integration that was published last May and July, I think, and there explicitly it says that this strategy will unlock the potential of sustainable biomass and biofuels, green hydrogen, and synthetic fuels. This is important. It is a political statement in an annex to the EU Green Deal strategy communication. The second is the hydrogen strategy for a climate neutral Europe. And this is about creating an industrial chain, boost demand in industry, mobility, and promote research and innovation in clean hydrogen. In addition, we have the biodiversity strategy for 2030, which is very linked to the sustainable biomass and feedstock for many of the technologies for the biofuels and bioenergy. It's about restoring forests, soils, and wetlands and creating green spaces and cities. And whatever is done in the development of the technologies and products, it has to be compatible with this biodiversity strategy. And of course, we have the sustainable and smart mobility strategy. Like by 2030, the strategy says that at least 30 million zero-emission vehicles will be in operation. We will double the high-speed rail traffic. The collective travel of under 500 kilometers will be carbon neutral. There will be automated mobility deployed at large scale, and of course, vessels ready for market that are of zero emission. While by 2035, there is a similar thing for zero large aircraft ready for the market. This is a strategy. Under this strategy, there are two initiatives that are proposals for regulation, are planned in this quarter, the Fuel EU Maritime and the Renewable Fuel EU Aviation. Briefly, I have put here the most important points of these two initiatives. They are both trying to accelerate or to boost the market uptake of sustainable alternative fuels. These sustainable alternative fuels are a little bit different in maritime than in aviation. For maritime, we are talking about liquid biofuels, e-liquids, decarbonized gases like bio-LNG gas, etc., hydrogen, decarbonized hydrogen-derived fuels like methane, ammonia, etc. While in the aviation, we primarily talk about advanced biofuels and electrofuels in the EU. So in the maritime, we talk about sustainable alternative fuels, and in the aviation, sustainable aviation fuels. They are both SAF. In the maritime, this should be done in a well-to-wake approach for the greenhouse gas emissions. Slips of methane should be taken into account. The production should be simulated at large scale to reduce the price gap, and the demand should be boosted, involving the stakeholders, the users, the ship operators, or those to bunker alternative fuels or connect to grid at birth, because also power for the vessels is in the picture. And there will be support measures like access to funding, differentiation at port feeds, etc., and requirements perhaps for blending or a share of the sustainable alternative fuels and also site electricity. And the message is technology neutral carbon intensity of energy used in maritime. On the aviation, also there is discussion for blending mandate. There is for suppliers both and for airlines, because right now we have a very small SAF in the EU. The revision also of the multiplier for aviation fuel, the 20% multiplier under the RED II is going to be revised. A central auctioning mechanism that producers bid at lowest price, funding mechanisms, prioritization of feedstock for SAF, collaborative platform to, like the stakeholders coordination platform to help with purchase agreements and airlines, and technical facilitation. So these are the highlights. And other legislation which is important under the 2030 climate target plan is, of course, the EU emissions trading system revision, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, the effort sharing regulation, the renewable energy directive, where both the renewable energies and the transport targets are going to be revised, the energy efficiency directive, the LULUCF, methane emissions in the energy sector, the energy tax directive, the alternative fuels infrastructure, the performance standards for CO2 emission in light commercial vehicles and passenger cars, the buildings directive, energy performance of building directives, and the third energy package for gas, for the carbonized gas market. So all these are important pieces that will shape the market of technologies like the HTL. Where the money will come from for all these actions of the Green Deal, of course, we have the multi-financial framework that it is adopted now. It is about 1 trillion plus the recovery package, and it will be between money that will come directly from the EU budget and others that will be triggered by the EU budget, like private and public investments. And the heart of this is the Invest EU program. Now, the recovery package, it's another 750 billion, and it will go to 3 pillars. The first is to support the member states, the second is to support the industry, and the third is to support the R&I, and with several actions. The important for us is for the next research and innovation framework program, there is a top up from this recovery plan of about 13.5 billions. Now, the big instrument for research and innovation policy is the Horizon Europe. There is a political agreement of the Council with the European Parliament on 11 December 2020 on the Commission's proposal. And this is the final structure and budgets of the Horizon Europe. We have 3 pillars. The pillar on excellent science, Pillar 1, more on the Research Innovation Council, Research Infrastructure, Marie Curie. The second pillar, which is about the global challenges, and there we have 6 clusters. And the third, which is about innovation, it is about SMEs, the European Innovation Council, the European Innovation Ecosystem, and the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. The total budget in current prices is 95.5 billion. It includes 5.4 billion from the Next Generation EU, the recovery package. The global challenges, Pillar 2, receives overall 53.8 billion. And the cluster, which is the cluster associated with HTL, the climate, energy, and mobility, receives more than 15 billion. And it is important to know that over 35% of the Horizon Europe budget is dedicated to climate objectives. Now, if we have a closer look at the cluster 5, which is climate, energy, and mobility, there are several impacts. There are 6 impacts, actually, 2 per area, 2 for climate, 2 for energy, and 2 for mobility, that will be achieved through the research and innovation policy in Horizon Europe. So, for energy, it is to achieve more efficient, clean, sustainable, secure, and competitive energy supply through new solutions for smart grids, energy systems based on more performant renewable energy solutions. This is number 1, so to have renewable energies and better integrated smart grids and energy systems. And the second is to have efficient and sustainable use of energy, accessible for all, through a clean energy system and a just transition. So this leads, these 2 impacts lead to 2 destination areas under which energy is addressed: the sustainable, secure, and competitive energy supply, and the destination of efficient, sustainable, and inclusive energy use. And if we look a little bit closer to the destination of sustainable, secure, and competitive energy supply, to have this supply more efficient, clean, sustainable, and secure, we have the areas where we address these impacts. The one is the global leadership in renewable energy technologies, another is the grids, the systems, energy systems, and storage, and the third is the carbon capture, utilization, and storage, together complemented by cross-cutting issues and leveraging between public and private investments in clean energy systems. Now, for bioenergy, biofuels, and renewable fuels under the cluster 5, what happens is, as you see from the support also of the legislation where sustainable biomass, biofuels, renewable fuels, synthetic fuels, hydrogen are mentioned, there will be a growing market for advanced biofuels and renewable fuels. And all those bioenergy, biofuels, renewable fuels are essentially for energy use, but also as energy carriers. On the other hand, the biofuels, the advanced biofuels, is the most deployable solution for the aviation and shipping, also heavy road. We saw in the fuel Europe maritime and renewable EU fuel aviation that the emphasis is given into these fuels. But the problem again is still reaching competitiveness of the technologies, and this needs to be done also through research and innovation for the cost, for the performance in terms of emissions, for the sustainability, for the efficiency. So the research and innovation policy has these headlines: the technology improvement and technology diversification. So technology, let's say, neutrality or technology support to pathways under the vast portfolio of the technologies for these products, feedstock diversification to be also compatible with a biodiversity strategy, drop-in renewable fuels for sectors that are needed, market uptake measures, particularly for the sectors we see that have particular transport needs, also long-term and breakthrough research and market-creating innovation, international cooperation, and for uptake of more ready to enter the market solutions, coordination with other instruments and risk funding financing. Overall, the picture for the bioenergy, biofuels, and renewable fuels looks like this. We used and continues to support feedstocks like waste, residues, forest, agriculture, organic fraction of municipal and industrial waste, carbon content in flue gases, aquatic biomass, renewable energy also for the production, power, heat, sunlight, and with CO2. And also as products, we see bioheat power, bio-CHP sustainable, bioliquids, biogas, biomethane, liquid biofuels, renewable fuels of non-biological origin, and sectors we see road, marine, aviation, all sectors. So in 2020, we had almost 400 million dedicated to topics in these areas, 48 topics, 20 areas, 11 years, 7 market uptake measures, and 10 strategic actions. The technologies covered over all the portfolio, from thermochemical, including pyrolysis, gasification, HTL, even combustion for CHP, to biochemical, chemical, fermentation, electrochemical, photochemical, and we addressed also supply chain, sustainability, market uptake, standards, and public acceptance. And here for the hydrothermal liquefaction, we have 7 projects, the 4 refinery, the high flex fuel, the heat to fuel, the waste to road, the next gen road fuels, the BL2F and the F cubed. These are all research and innovation actions, of course, due to the TRL of this technology. And you can see that all of them are running. Some of them are going to finish this year, and others will go up to 2023, like the last ones from the 23 Color S23 of 2019. So you can see that they target all areas, the road transport, the aviation, biojet, drop-in fuels, and intermediate bioenergy carriers with fuel characteristics. Now, looking forward, we have been discussing with the research and innovation stakeholders and the industrial stakeholders in several workshops during Horizon 2020. Last was in EUBCE. What are the needs? And we come up with, let's say, some general trends. One is, of course, improving the technology in biofuels, bioenergy, and renewable fuels. And this could be like supporting next generation technologies, algal fuels, novel catalysis, artificial photosynthesis, etc. Also, in the technologies, we include technologies that are at 3 to 5 TRL. The other thing is to couple the renewable electricity or the renewable hydrogen production and the CCS in any combination with bioenergy conversion systems, with biofuel and renewable fuel production. So one could think to support efficient production with negative carbon emissions, for example, or renewable energy carriers from renewable electricity surplus and CO2 emissions, or other things similar. A third area is to have bioenergy solutions and circular economy in a value chain approach, for example, like integrating production in existing industrial plants, or addressing complete value chains, or gasifying biogenic residues and waste in a sustainable and circular way, etc. Also, efficient integration with other renewable energy technologies is one area that deserves exploration, like hybrid heating systems, or renewable energy integration in industrial processing, in forestry, in agriculture, other areas. And of course, it remains very pertinent always to support the gaseous, liquids, and solid biomass intermediate carriers and renewable energy carriers, I would say, because these are linking elements for integrating bioenergy in the energy system and in the all energy consuming sectors. For example, the biomethane, all the renewable energy carriers for heating, etc. And lastly, a few words on the how to leverage public-private investments to support work in also the renewable energies and renewable fuels. So we have put forward the Clean Energy Transition Co-Fund Partnership. They have published their Strategic Research Innovation Agenda in November 2020. And actually, the whole scope is to support clean, affordable energy production and conversion technologies, to have a climate neutral, flexible and robust energy system, to look at storage and integration in the energy system of the storage, to look at circular flows, resource efficiency, energy efficiency in the energy sector, and to, from the social point of view, to take into account the inclusive energy transition, the sector integration coupling, and the digital transformation. The idea is to pool national and regional resources and funding programs together with the EU co-fund that will enable the transition of the built environment, the transport, the industry, and other sectors to clean, low-carbon energy, and that will be implemented through annual joint calls for proposals resulting in grants to third parties with EU co-funding. I think that is all I had to tell you. Thank you very much for your attention, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. We'll take questions after we've had the next two speakers. And I can see we already have one question for you in the Q&A. So you can look into that now. And we go from a European perspective to a global perspective. So Sylvain Vadier from
Yes.
will you?
Of course, I'm sharing my screen. Let me know if it works. Yes. View and perfect. Full screen. And yes, I'm on with the video. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you are all well. Thanks for the organizer to put up a really good program, I think. And I try to be short. Preben, you have to stop me eventually. I have too many slides, as usual. So I was asked to prepare some slides about the global policy market scenario. And then I tried to expand to actually what are the global drivers we see from all the thermochemical technology, especially hydrothermal liquefaction. So yes, I start with a conclusion because maybe some of you will leave after hearing me a few minutes. So the first point is basically legislation, and Maria gave a really good overview of what's happening in EU. I have one slide about what's happening in the UK with development fuels, and it's basically here where we see some legislative incentives towards thermochemical technology, so from waste to fuels, basically. I have one slide about North America, US and Canada, and it's also commercial projects going on in Canada and the US, but as far as I can see, the framework is not fully in place for hydrothermal liquefaction, but if you have any input about that, please write on the Q&A later when we come to these slides. I'd love to hear feedback from you. So that's the legislation part. Then there's all the petrochemical industry. And you might be aware about this thing called chemical recycling, which is so to use plastic waste, you have mechanical recycling and also chemical recycling. And then here you have technology like pyrolysis and hydrothermal liquefaction that will allow basically plastic to be used again to make plastic. So it's really this circular economy drive. And here we believe, and we see a lot of activities in this, a lot on pyrolysis, but there's still a few projects on hydrothermal liquefaction of plastic waste. So here we think that that could be also a very good opportunity for hydrothermal liquefaction. Aviation and marine fuels. Maria was really good at explaining what's happening with the refueled EU aviation and fuel EU maritime things. For aviation fuels, the specification for products are very strict. Of course, you don't want your plane to crash. And right now, the pathway for hydrothermal liquefaction is not approved in the STM by the STM committee. But it's there's still some projects on that. What might happen first is a marine fuel thing, because the engine for marine fuel can handle a lot of things, and especially bio-oil and bio-crudes are possibly more suitable for marine fuels. So there's also the price thing that has to be discussed, but that would be from a technical point of view. Marine fuel are obviously a really good outcome for bio-oil and bio-crudes. So high potential. And then public funding, I won't go through all the really good details we got from Maria, but there's a lot of money, especially in EU, but I also listed a few things. So now we'll go through slides on each of these points, and hopefully that would be relevant for you. So when we talk about, from waste to fuels, what is it we look at? So it's quite complicated, which is makes it very interesting. But basically, you have legislation, certification, greenhouse gas, so all the sustainability thing to consider. Then it's all the feedstock availability and quality to think about. Is it sewage sludge? Is it algae? Is it municipal solid waste, forestry residue? What kind of feedstock do you have, and what is the quality? So that's also something to consider when you choose your technology. Then you have this solid to liquid technology. So in my company, Topsoe, we're focusing on 3 technologies. We're we are supporting all of them. So gasification and then Fischer-Tropsch, pyrolysis and then upgrading, and then hydrothermal liquefaction and upgrading. So each of these technology have different abilities, and maybe Lasse will touch upon that later in the more technical presentation, but about carbon recovery, product quality, greenhouse gas emission, and so forth. And they are very specific to some feedstocks. So obviously, hydrothermal liquefaction is more suited for weight-based feedstocks, but it also has other applications, like we talked about plastic earlier. Then it's how can this biocrude bio-oil be upgraded to produce fuels, which is really important. And here fuels, we talk about, of course, road, so renewable diesel. Then you also have a renewable jet fuel, but it's not approved, as we discussed yet. And then bunker or maritime fuels. So yes, there's also a demand for naphtha, renewable naphtha from the petchem industry to make bio or renewable plastic. And here, that could also be a good market, an outcome for such technologies. And of course, all CapEx, OpEx, so the money, it has to be involved at one point. So, but today, we'll mostly talk about legislation. You all have seen these predictions, and we're not going into detail, but basically right now we are around 2 million barrels per day of biofuel produced, and it will increase driven by legislation. So will we go to 5, 10 million barrels per day? It's hard to know, but yes, right now it's mostly ethanol, 70%, maybe 20% FAME, biodiesel, and 5% renewable diesel. And SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel, is a very small portion of it. This will increase, and then what is the role of yes, we often show these slides about to customers when we discuss about generation. You for sure have your own definition of what is first, second, and third. That's my own, so yeah, feel free to comment on this. But yeah, we have the first generation, virgin oils. Then you have second generation, which are mostly lipid-based and that are waste. So used cooking oil, animal fats, distillers corn oil, crude tall oil from the pulp mill industry, and all the residue from palm oil production. And then you have the third generation, which are more sustainable because they are like solid waste, for example. We talk about sewage sludge, mixed plastic waste, and so forth. And also this low ILUC, rotational or winter crops, carinata, and so forth, algae. So let's look at how much do we have of each of these feedstock. Let's say virgin oils. I love this report from UFA, from this German institute. It's really good. And then the 2019 reports basically listed the 4 big oils and 160 million tons per year. So if we use all of them, which for biofuels, which is not the case now it's around 15%, you would produce 3 million barrels per day of renewable diesel. If we used all of it, which doesn't make any sense, but that's just a back of the envelope calculation. Let's look at waste, oils, and fat. There's a really nice report from the World Economic Forum that was published, I think, November last year. And they made, there's a nice section about feedstock availability and what can be made out of it. And they calculated around 40 million tons per year of waste, oils, and fats, which would make maybe 1 million barrels per day. So we need, of course, legislation is there, but there is a strong incentive and a need to use what we call third generation, which are solid waste. So, and it's here where hydrothermal liquefaction, amongst other technologies, can provide support. So this is a slide I prepared when I started this presentation. So Maria mentioned the RED II directive, but basically you have this infamous maybe, I don't know, Annex 9 Part A list, which says that, you need minimum 3.5% of transport fuels produced in Europe that needs to come from these sources. And then many of them are solid. So I tried to list some of them: forestry residue, algae, grape marks, manure, municipal solid waste, and so forth. So here, maybe there will be a recast of the RED II directive next year or this year, and maybe this will be increased. I don't know, I've heard different things, but let's see. And then there's also this recycled carbon. So plastic waste and tires. It's mostly, the trends we see, it's mostly to make new plastic, but there's also some people who want to make fuels out of it. And here it's not part of the renewable category, but it's recycled carbon fuels. The RED II allows it to be, it's covered, but then each member state might decide to include it or not. So, but that could be also a driving force for hydrothermal liquefaction. The UK with the RTF4 program also is they call development fuels, and it's quite similar to the Annex 9 part. I won't go into detail, but basically, the UK is also covering, I think, hydrothermal liquefaction. And then they might also consider recycled carbons. I look a bit at what's happening in the US. So in California, I found one pathway based on forestry residue, but it's using pyrolysis. So I don't know if there's other companies doing the approval for having hydrothermal liquefaction, but that's one thing. And then this RFS, which is a federal state system, there's this category M, and that's the next slide. So what does category M say? Basically, it's to produce renewable fuels from all this type of solid waste. And here there's a long list of technology. I didn't see specifically hydrothermal liquefaction, but the last category might cover hydrothermal liquefaction. So if you have any input about that, feel free to write in the Q&A section. So that's really what I had about the global legislation framework. Let's talk about chemical recycling. So in EU, it's really big. Thanks to legislation, 50% of plastic packaging waste have to be recycled by 2025. And since January this year, there's a 800 euro tax, 800 euro per ton tax on non-recycled plastic packaging waste. The petchem industry is also really investing a lot of money in chemical recycling. Many players have really high targets to use plastic waste, and here I listed Neste, Sabic, BP, Total, and many more have really high targets. And here, hydrothermal liquefaction again could have a part to play, I believe, we believe. Aviation fuels, Maria mentioned it. If you look at there's really nice, how's it called? The sustainability, the mobility plan presented in December. And basically you have some graph until 2050. And if I understood correctly, these graphs and also some draft I've seen about this initiative. In 2050, if you take all the jet fuel, 1/3 will be fossil in Europe, 1/3 will be e-jet fuel, and the other side would be advanced biofuels. And here, that could also be a chance for all the thermochemical technologies, including hydrothermal liquefaction. And then will it be feedstock or technology specific? It's hard to know. The pathway for using HTL is not approved yet, but I checked yesterday on the CAFE website, and they do say that there's some significant number of prospects are being pursued, and CAFE is aware of them. So I think there's some discussion already with OEMs and so forth to have this pathway approved, which will be the game changer. Quality renewable marine fuels. I didn't see any draft about the initiative, and it will be launched in Q1 21. But if you look again at this EU smart and sustainable mobility plans, this is the numbers you can see from inland and then international maritime fuel. Let's just look one. This is a 2050 prediction with a different scenario, and you have liquid biofuels. So maybe 1/3, I expected. And here again, pyrolysis, hydrothermal liquefaction have a big part to play, we believe. Funding, Maria mentioned all the money available with several more than hundreds of billions of euros. I look at Canada. They also actually have at federal level they have an investment fund, and 2/3 will be for low carbon fuels. And British Columbia also has credits under, it's called the Part 3 agreement for low carbon fuels. So if you can get credits if you have this low carbon fuel, basically. In the UK, I saw recently some SAF competition schemes being implemented, and I don't know if some HTL processes are being pursued, but that could be relevant. So there's also funding. So back to the conclusion, and I'm saying I'm running out of time. Legislation, the framework is in place in EU and UK. Hopefully in North America it will happen, especially with the new administration, and Canada, I guess, will follow. It starts often in British Columbia and then it spreads. The petchem industry will have a strong, might be a game changer also for hydrothermal liquefaction. Let's see what happens. Aviation and marine fuels are big. We know that marine, for light duty, it's possibly electrification will slowly take over. So aviation and marine fuels, biofuels will have a big part to play, and then public funding is available. So that's all I had for today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask now in the Q&A, but also I'm happy to answer any question later.
Thank you very much. And I know you have to leave at some point, so yes. I'll give the floor to Lasse right away and ask him to make his presentation fast so that we can get to the question and answer session, so that you can stay long enough to answer a few questions there. Lasse? Lasse Rosendal, you have your slide on there, and take it away.
We cannot hear you very well, sorry.
Sorry, now you can. My microphone was in the wrong place. Sorry about that. Anyway, so I'm thanking you for this opportunity. So what I'll do is I'll sort of change focus a little bit and go much more into a specific project, namely the Next Gen Road Fuels project. So kind of starting out on the next part, which is the technical sessions. It'll be in the form of a halfway status. We are midway now, and so I'll recap on why we're doing what we're doing and how far we've come and what we have to do still. So the Next Gen Road Fuels project was a response to the topic that was asking for road fuels, sustainable road fuels, and our scope is feedstocks from urban activities, so sewage sludge, food waste, that kind of thing. And of course, the main focus is the conversion of these feedstocks by HTL to these fuels. We also look at, as we go down through this process cycle, we also look at added value issues. We look at protein extraction, we look at nutrients, we look at advanced water management, and we also look at markets that are probably a little wider than just the road fuel. So marine is a little bit also in scope for some of the fuel. But let me go a little bit deeper into what we are doing. So this is an overview of the consortium and the roles that we each play. So we've been looking at feedstocks from a range of European sites, taking into account the variations in such things as sludge across Europe. We've, in terms of the primary conversion, the HTL step, main partners are Steeper Energy, KIT, Sener in Spain, and Aalborg University for the upgrading, the refinery part, Technical University of Munich, Chemical Process and Energy Resources Institute in Greece, Steeper Energy once again, ENI in Italy are the main partners. And then we have on the market side also Good Fuels alongside ENI with the market knowledge. This is all supported by process design, techno-economics, and LCA by Syntef, Steeper Energy, and Sener. And then we have the commercial partners really handling exploitation and business development, Steeper, ENI, Helder Topsøe. Sorry, I forgot to mention Helder Topsøe also, of course, in the upgrading, Good Fuels, and then Eta Florence as our dissemination partner. And as you can see from the simple timeline at the bottom, we are around just past a halfway point, so this is a good time to make a status. So what did we achieve? Well, one of our major deliverables halfway through this project was to produce 100 kilos of upgradable, so high quality biocrude from urban waste. And in the process of reaching that milestone, we've mostly worked with sewage sludge, and you can see we've processed quite substantial amounts in all of this, and also the organic fraction of municipal solid waste. And you can see, let me just turn on the laser pointer. You can see here, this is the sludge slurry that we prepare, and this is the food waste slurry that we prepare. Now, in order to get to the high quality biocrude, one of the challenges we faced is the whole product separation to get to a quality where we have a relatively pure biocrude, so not excessive amounts of inorganics, not excessive amounts of water, not excessive amounts of solids. And so part of this has really been focusing on building that intermediate processing stage to get to the quality of oil that you see in the image to the right. And I would just like to share with you, and this is now it gets a little bit exciting whether it'll work, a small video that shows this oil and gives quite a good idea of what it is that we are now taking to the next stage in terms of quality for the upgrading. So this is oil from sludge, and this is the sample that was distributed to the next stage of the project. So let me return to the presentation. As I said, also we've been looking at other value vectors. So in this case, it's been very much on proteins, protein extractions from sludge. This has been quite extensively covered, and we have pathways and technologies that allow us to do this with reasonable yields. But what we are tackling right now is that this is relatively high cost. So this is one of the things that we are working on in parallel to the HTL pathway itself. Nutrients, another added value vector. Phosphorus is something that is much debated, and in all these technologies, it's one of the things that we need to demonstrate that we can actually handle. And so what we've been looking at is how do we extract phosphorus from our processing. And as you can see from that bar chart, these are different ways of running HTL experiments. The middle one, the one that's entitled fifth cycle, is what we would call a steady state run. And you can see that the blue bar indicates that almost all the phosphorus is actually recovered in the solid product, and from there we can make it into a fertilizer for agriculture. Plastics, microplastics in the environment is increasingly being identified as a problem, and HTL and technologies like HTL, of course, also look at how to handle and what happens when you put in microplastic containing feedstocks. And here is a study that we've conducted on sewage sludge on the plastics. So what we've done is identify not just the amount of plastic in wet sludge, but also which plastics are present. This is very complicated. It takes almost half a year to get to the point where you can actually determine that. And then we did the same thing on the product phases, and I've included here the solid phase. And what we can see is that we have around a 99% reduction of the microplastics in the sludge, which is very good. And we can also see which of the plastics are the ones that are amenable to the HTL conversion, and which are the ones that are a little bit more recalcitrant. But again, we get an almost full reduction. Same kind of study has been conducted on medicine, commonly found in sludge, and again the results come out with almost 100% destruction. Lastly, we've spent significant effort building up a technoeconomics methodology based on process design, process flow sheets, to handle all these unit operations that we are putting into systems, and to allow us to feed in our experimental data in the second half of the project to actually start creating credible scalability, implementation, cost assessment, and process design work. And this is something that we are at a point where we have prepared this for the actual analyses. And so at the tipping point now, looking towards the second half, as I said, we now are at a stage where we have very nice biocrude, and the second part of the project will very much focus on turning that into fuels, either diesel. Gasoline is also there as one of the smaller areas, but diesel and marine blend stocks and drop-ins is what we're targeting. And one of the issue, of course, is a hydrotreating setup, multi-stage, catalytic bed design. And in order to guide us into this part of the project, we use fairly advanced analysis technologies as FTICR MS systems that allow us to understand better the heteroatom functionality in the oil, and understanding. So as it's sewage sludge. Nitrogen, as you can see in the middle here, is a key issue, but also the oxygen functionalities in terms of how we design the thermal ramping in the hydro treatment. Those are all really important for us in order to maximize yields and time on stream in the upgrading. Electrocatalysis, again, something which is turning out to be a bit of a hot topic these days, is within our scope, and so we're looking at electrocatalysis as well as part of the full upgrading procedures and incorporating that into our process design. Once we've actually run a biocrude through this, we will be looking at the fuel properties and also demonstrating these in relevant technologies. And at the same time, we will of course be optimizing, going back to the HTL and looking at all the learning that we've got from actually doing production runs and turning that into optimization. Continued also to look at the added value streams, again, trying to increase the valorization of the proteins. So and also of course now we sort of start on implementation and commercialization activities, and so this is where we bring our modeling process modeling framework into use. We work of course also with LCA, as this now becomes important, of course, to document that it is actually living up to our own KPIs as well as those by the European Commission. And then we start looking at geographically specific markets, so in terms of feedstocks and products, as well as geographically and scale specific implementation, so to actually have business cases that can take us to the next stage. And so this is really what we'll be doing for the next 2 years in the project, and I hope that you'll all stay tuned, because I'm sure that we will be bringing out lots of very interesting results. So on that, I'd like to end and thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much. In the meantime, the questions they have mostly been answered already, but then again, we have also spent the time. However, there's one for Lasse here. The tier that you have done, is it available for the public? Can it be possible to get a copy of it? It's a very specific question for Lasse.
Yeah, not yet, but but it will be. But it's at this point, it's very much a work in progress. So it's still within the project consortium. I can say that it is Sintef that is driving this development.
And another question that has been addressed is the timeline. When might it be continuous pilot plant running on upgrading HTL TARs? Well, for that you need to have a plant continuously producing HTL. And what is the timeline? When will we start to see a number of plants actually running in commercial or semi-commercial scale? That would be a question both for Lasse and well,
I think I'll leave the commercial part to Sylvain, but and I think also we'll probably in some of the other project presentations hear about continuous upgrading achievements. So, but Stephen is right. We're very much still in the lab, but it is very, very fastly developing. So we're running in terms of lab scale stuff. It's rather big.
Yeah, I agree with Lasse. What I wrote back in the answer is that the question was from Neste about when will we have continuous units, 100% units. I think the bottleneck right now it's upscaling of hydrothermal liquefaction, and then as soon as it's ready, at least we'll be ready to upgrade this. So and I'm not concerned. So.
And from Maria's presentation, we also heard a lot of new regulations and amendments in the making. There is financing for research and development in the area, but but we need legislation also to push the market before we'll probably see the big number of commercial plants out there. But that will probably come with the new regulations as well. Let's move on to the next group of projects being presented, and saying goodbye to the first group of people. The next one, the first one in the next round of projects presenting is Valentin Battiger, presenting the HyFlex fuel project. We'll have a number of European Horizon 2020 projects shortly being presented here. Maria had a list where we could see these projects on, and a few extra, but let's hear from HyFlex fuel first. Valentin.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I don't know if you can see my screen yet, but yes. I guess that it's working now. So thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to give an update on the HyFlex fuel project, which I'm coordinating. The HyFlex fuel project is one of the earlier Horizon 2020 HTL projects. It started in 2017, and it will end this September this year. And what you see here is an overview of the project, and the main objective is to show that different feedstocks can be converted by hydrothermal liquefaction into larger amounts of biocrude, and then it also includes the catalytic upgrading of these biocrudes to transportation fuels, and very specifically we have a focus on the aviation fuels in this project, but of course what we get out is a mixture of hydrocarbons at different boiling temperatures. Another important thing of this hydrothermal liquefaction fuel production pathway is how we deal with the residual phases. So this is a processed water phase, and it's a solid phase, and we have a different work package with different tasks looking at the utilization of these phases energetically by anaerobic digestion, hydrothermal gasification, also for the cleaning up of the processed water, and together with the solids, we investigate nutrient recovery to form a fertilizer product here. So a quick overview over the project partners involved and their tasks in the HyFlex fuel project. So feedstock potential assessments are conducted by DBFZ, partner from Germany. Hydrothermal liquefaction is done in a pilot plant at Aarhus University, Denmark. Upgrading, we have Aalborg University, Halter Topsoe, you saw presentations by them before. Co-refining of biocrudes is a task done by ENI in the project. Energetic valorization via hydrothermal gasification by PSI, anaerobic digestion by OWS, partner from Belgium, and the recovery of inorganic nutrients in form of fertilizer product is investigated by the University of Hohenheim. Bauhaus Luftfahrt, where I'm from, we are coordinating the project, and we are responsible for the system analysis. Arctic is a project management partner. So I quickly step now into the individual work packages and show some basic and important results from the individual partners. In terms of feedstock analysis, we did a potential analysis, both in terms of the total aggregated waste and residue potentials in Europe, but also specifically, DBFZ has created these kind of heat maps that you see over there, where you can choose a specific location and where you can then have a specific supply network based on the road network, and an analysis what kind of different feedstocks are then available within a 50-kilometer driving distance from an individual plant location all over Europe. Regarding the HTL conversion itself, here we are in the unique position that we have Aarhus University as a partner, which have a sizable pilot plant with about 60 liters per hour capacity. So this is slightly subcritical. And the reactor itself, you can imagine it like a tube which is wound with a total length of 140 meters. So the reactor length is about 40 meters, and then you have 50 meters for heat exchange, where you heat up the feed slurry to the reaction temperature, and then the product mix is then cooled down, and of course for this hydrothermal liquefaction process at 350 degrees Celsius, heat exchange is a very important consideration to make this process energy efficient. And if we have sufficient dry matter content in the feed slurry, we achieve good ERA values here. Aarhus University has treated a lot of feedstocks, and the total biocrude production is more than 300 kilograms from this project. So this is just one glimpse from the results that have been obtained with the pilot scale plant. It's an example from sewage sludge, where biocrude yields of about 40% have been achieved upon some optimization of the feed slurry preparation. And this is also one very important thing here, which I want to highlight. Has also been said by Lasse before, that HTL here has an additional benefit, being a thermal, high temperature, high pressure technology that can destroy a great number of micropollutants that are found in sewage sludge. So here down there is a publication where you can read more detail about this. These are some ways where we can enhance the performance of the process for other feedstocks than food sludge. For dry feedstock, water phase recycling was shown to enhance the biocrude yields. We could, for some specific feedstocks, achieve dry matter contents up to 23%. And what's also very interesting is that co-liquefaction, certain feedstock can increase the yields and have some synergy effects here. Stepping a little bit into the valorization of the aqueous phase and the solids, I have mentioned that before, that we investigate catalytic hydrothermal gasification and anaerobic digestion. So these are at the moment only pictures. I cannot show you more because the lack of time, but these things are running and the results will be presented elsewhere. Also at the University of Hohenheim, phosphorus was from the solids and the HTL process waters. This is relating a little bit also to the question we had before, if there is continuous hydro treatment of HTL biocrudes. So you see the same plant that Lasse has shown before, because Halder Topsoe and Alba University are also partners in high-flex fuel. So this is a research scale plant, of course, but it's a continuous plant which was running for more than 300 hours for specific production campaigns within the project. You see here the type of upgraded oil that can be produced from sewage sludge in this case, and on the right side, after distillation, you see the different fractions. And what you also see here is the differences in colors, with the light colors which are preferred down here, with an upgrading under somewhat harsher conditions, and somewhere here in the middle you see the kerosene fractions that we have then sent to another H2020 project, JetScreen, but also to partners in the US to analyze these samples for their compatibility with jet fuel specifications. Another thing which is important here is the co-processing option that ENI is investigating in this project. So also very interesting results here, but I don't have time to address this now. My last slide here, or second last slide, is now a result from another project. This is from JetScreen, analyzing the HTL kerosene samples that have been produced in the Hyplex Fuel project. And this is a little bit messy, this slide, but these are basically the compositions of the HTL kerosene samples, and these are the compositions of typical other aviation fuels. And what you see is the composition is similar, but it also deviates in some specific things. So, for instance, the soot sludge HTL fuel here has a high share of cycloalkanes. So this is good. So these kind of molecules have nice cold flow properties, and also they, if you look a little bit in the details of the aviation fuel, they can be complementary to this more alkane type renewable fuels, and they can adjust a little bit the density of the jet fuel. So it might be a very interesting blend component here to produce aviation fuels that are 100% renewable in the future. So with this, I end my short presentation just with a few links to the Hyplex Fuel website, where you can get more information and also see a list of publications from the project. And we also have produced a project video that you can watch at YouTube, and also JetScreen and Hyplex Fuel have produced a project video on the collaboration between the two European Union projects. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Valentin, and please have a look at the questions piling up in the Q&A tab, and then we jump right away to Judith Sandqvist from SINTEF presenting Bio for Fuels. Judith.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to. Yeah, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the possibility to be able to share a little bit of information of the Norwegian Center for Sustainable Bio-based Fuels and Energy. This is a national center, which is quite big, and the aim is to support the Norwegian and international industry with their quest to develop innovative and sustainable viable biomass conversion technologies. Our target feedstock is lignocellulosic biomass and organic residues. This is quite a broad center. It's not only liquefaction. We have organized the research activities in 3 value chains, and we have 2 supporting sub-projects. For the research activities, I'm going to focus on is in the hydrothermal liquefaction and upgrading. In this center, we do together with our other projects, but we do have our own research activities as well. So for the HTL, our aim is to establish a simple and easy to operate continuous research reactor, where we focus on the feedstock, mainly the Norwegian relevant feedstock, and inorganic chemistry. So we do both modeling and experimental work. For the upgrading activities, we are doing HTO catalyst preparation and testing. And of course, we have a lot of international cooperation as well. So for the modeling part, we have been the last years, the research activities have been running for 3 years in this center. And we have been mainly working on the modeling part, where we took an existing model for the modeling the phase distribution of inorganic elements in HTL reaction. This is a constrained model, but in order to be able to compare to the experimental data, we need to model the cooling and the compression. And for that, we have been using a commercial model, which is an OLE studio stream analyzer. And I need to admit that this is not a simple quest. The models are quite difficult to use, especially together. And we found out that it's very, very difficult to validate towards literature published data, because usually you cannot find all the relevant data needed for this work in any article. There's very few available. So what we are doing now is we will be doing our own experiments where we produce all the data. Of course, we are intent to continue on this work, this modeling work, and we are looking for other researchers as well who want to join forces, because if it was some easy task, we would have some models available right now, but there are none. So just please stay in contact. So what we have, and we have received continuous reactor a year ago now. And then, of course, Corona strikes. So it wasn't easy to start up work with, but now it is working. So you can see the specs here. It's a tiny reactor. We have very tiny tubing and a continuous stir-tank reactor. We're using it in 2 projects. Another one is BR2F, where we are going to do corrosion testing in real HTL environment. So we're going to look at how the different alloys cope with this HTL. So we have achieved the 1 milestone at least, and we have been performing a successful experiment on wood powder. And we were very lucky to be able to receive an exchange PhD student from Aalborg University, who did the first experimental campaign. So we have been using 3 feedstock: wood powder, lignin, and microalgae. Of course, it wasn't easy, and due to the fact that the student was here for a limited time, so we chose to do batch experiment on the lignin and microalgae. We're still doing the analysis, not everything finished, and we have planned the publication. So here you can see the results of the first runs, where we compare subcritical and supercritical conditions, and here you can see where we compare the continuous and the batch mode of the same reactor. When it comes to the upgrading activities, we are doing it together with a Norwegian-Indian collaborative project, where we doing the catalyst development and the catalyst testing as well. So it's 2 tasks in 1 project. And here you can see that even without the catalyst, you have a significant HTO activity. But if you increase the temperature and add catalyst, you decrease the oxygen nets. So it's working fine. And finally, I would like to show you our stakeholders. We have from bioresources, the Norwegian technology providers, international partners, and end users and government and states. So it's a national team in biofuels research and activities for Norway. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Judith. And we jump right on to waste to road here at Halema.
Yeah, I'll try to share my screen. This one.
Perfect.
Does it work?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good, thanks. So before presenting some of the work we did in the Waste to Road project, I'll be concentrating on hydrothermal liquefaction. The value chain of the Waste to Road project is takes waste, a wide variety of waste to produce biofuels. Waste we look at are black liquor, digestate from the organic fraction of municipal solid waste. We also look at food waste from canteens, from the company restaurants at CA, even roadside grass and waste wood are considered for this project. The conversion takes place in 2 steps. The first is a primary conversion where we look at HTL, hydrothermal liquefaction, and flash pyrolysis. Then the produced biofuels, bioliquids, they're converted into biofuels by integrating them in existing refinery by adapted refinery operations such as upgrade FCC and catalytic upgrading. Everything is after all the processes have been more or less validated, we look at assimilation and an economic evaluation. In this particular presentation, I'll concentrate on 3 resources that from which I'll present results. First is digestate from produced from biomethanization plant in Oslo from municipal solid waste. Second is food waste that was collected from the company restaurants at CA. And the third one is black liquor. Now we use 2 different reactors in this project. First is a fairly standard batch reactor, 600 milliliter reactor. And the second one is a continuous plant, which is a 2 liter per hour unit. So it's quite small, much like Syntef's. It's a stirred reactor, stirred tubular reactor. And well, there's a schematic of it here. Some results of batch experiments. We have what you can see is we have an extremely wide variety of biocrude yields in the project, in the experiments. The best results we obtain typically with food waste, but also even digestate produces a fairly large amount of biocrude. And what we find is that black liquor actually produces a very low yield generally. So if we look at the quality of this biocrudes, we do by solvent extraction, we can determine how much char there is and how much bio-oil. We can see that actually food wastes are produce relatively good results. They have there's quite a lot of bio-oil in it, and black liquor there's almost no bio-oil. Now this is of course very dependent on the solvent we use. Actually we use ethyl acetate, but even with dichloromethane, it gives similar results. But it is of course dependent on the solvent. If we look at the ratio between oil and char in batch experiments, we see that for black liquor we obtain a dry black powder, which we call a biocrude, but it's of course not really a crude. And for food waste we get sticky liquids, sticky materials like, or even free-flowing liquids. It really depends on the resource and on the conditions. So we also do continuous experiments. Typically we do these at 300 degrees centigrade. Residence time of about 15 minutes in the reactor, which corresponds to 1.5 liters per hour. So it's a small production. With these experiments, we typically obtain free-flowing liquids that are extremely viscous. But when they're slightly heated, then they're actually quite nice. They're quite nice liquids. But when they're cold, of course, then they're frozen solid. Typical yields are about 50%. So it's actually lower than what we find in batch experiments. And we produce quite a lot of gas, actually. Typically 15 to 20% of gas. When we look at the different oils in gel permeation chromatography, we can determine the molecular weight, the average molecular weight in the, of different samples. And what we can see is that typically oil produced in batch experiments has much lower molecular weight than we find in continuous experiments. This is something that surprises in the beginning. But when we look a bit closer to the result, the difference between continuous and batch experiments, we find that typically we have lower biocrude yields in continuous experiments. We produce less char, which basically accounts for the lower biocrude yield, and we have very similar oil yields. However, the molecular weight is higher in the oil. in the oil produced by the continuous plant. So to conclude, we find that the screening of, we've done a lot of screening on different resources in batch, particularly in batch experiments. We use digestate, food waste, black liquor. Food wastes are the best resources. This is of course due to the fact that it contains a lot of lipids. It's not very rich in ash, which is a problem with digestate, which contains too much ash. But also it contains a lot of proteins and sugars, simple products, and not so much lignin, which helps at lower temperatures. Black liquor is actually it's quite complex. It's in itself, it doesn't produce very good results. But when we mix it with food waste, it does give reasonably good results, and there appears to be a synergistic effect between black liquor and food waste, and that the sum of the it's not just a linear combination. I think there's something happening there. Glycerol, however, doesn't really help in the liquefaction. So far, we produced about 10 kilograms of biocrude, which will be made available for upgrading. And very soon we'll be testing other resources such as finasse and the fermentable fraction of of municipal organic waste. These are ready, but we need these are next on the cards to be treated. Okay, thank you for your attention, and I'll ask some questions from the chat if you have any.
Thank you, Geert. And I can see that the panelists are busy answering questions in the Q&A runningly. That is good. We'll go to the next presenter, David Chiaramonti. You are ready?
Yeah.
Please take.
Share the screen. Is it okay?
Yes.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for inviting us to participate in this workshop. We participate to the Heat-to-Fuel project, which is coordinated by Goosen Energy Technology. And in that project, as I will show, we take care of the part of hydrothermal liquefaction and integration with other processes that we will see in a moment. So a short intro to Heat-to-Fuel, the unit, and then the coupling with the APR step. I will try to take it short. So the project itself addresses two routes, a dry and a wet one. The dry is going through gasification and Fischer-Tropsch to Fischer-Tropsch products, while we focus on the wet part, which is hydrothermal liquefaction and integration of the aqueous phase reforming and the water-soluble organic that are in the water phase of the HTL process. So we integrate an internal way to generate hydrogen, as well as to treat this water for the upgrading of the biocrude, or in any case for using this hydrogen in the biofuel upgrading routes. The unit that you can see in the figure has been fully designed, assembled, built, and commissioned within record. So it is completely internal work to the organization. It has a high pressure piston pump with a tubular reactor, so far going up to 370, actually, normally 350, but we are upgrading to higher temperature. Piston let down system, a time on stream of 8 hours. We are concentrating on a difficult fissile, which is lignin from cellulosic ethanol. And as I said, we are upgrading to this equipment, this unit, to supercritical operation. The idea, together with the Polytechnic of Turin, of the integration of these two processes is quite attractive to our view, because once we separate the biocrude and we have this aqueous phase, we can treat this aqueous phase with a liquid-liquid extraction, and then to send this to aqueous phase reforming process, which is a catalytic process, operating approximately around 270 degrees 60 bar with a commercial catalyst used to generate the hydrogen that is then sent back to the hydrotreatment. That is quite original, but is also strictly linked to the type of feedstock that is fed to the hydrothermal liquefaction. Come back to this in a moment. So the LLE of aqueous phase, the sulfonolics is used before APR to increase the biocrude yield, improve H2 production. The water phase then is recycled after APR. And our results show that the hydrogen can partially fulfill the hydrotreatment needs of the biocrude, some 35%. As I said, this is very much also dependent on the type of feedstock. Of course, working with the organic feedstock like organic wastes rather than lignin is quite different. Contamination also can be very different, and the catalyst is indeed sensitive to that. Here, some results. There are a number of papers already published on that. There are some others in preparation. On the left side, you can see the mass balance through using techniques like gas chromatography, mass gas chromatography, HPLC, Carfisher titration. We have been able to reach some 83 to 86% mass balance closure. The aqueous phase is mainly composed by acids and alcohols, but there's also some kind of 20% of phenols. With that, I mean oxygenated aromatics as I said, phenols, methoxyphenols, catechol, methoxycatechol. On the right-hand side, instead, you see the influence of solvent to water ratio in the H2 production, and the conversion of glycolic acid is also shown as a representative. Phenols are affecting the aqueous phase reforming process and brings to the activation of the catalyst. Selective removal of the phenolic compounds instead is very beneficial, increase the amount of biocrude yield and hydrogen production. The treatment of the aqueous phase from the APR process, from the HTL process with butyl acetate has proven to be more effective to deliver better hydrogen yield with respect to the EE. So there is start to be some evidence on that. Actually, we are ongoing with this process, with this project, and now, as planned in the project, we will launch an open request for a proposal to collaborate with us, funding from the project, for hydrotreating the HTL oil samples from this lignin-rich stream. It's not actually a residue because the lignin-rich stream is a quite significant amount in a lignocellulose bioethanol complex. It's probably or certainly a bigger amount than the ethanol itself. And this step will aim at carrying out hydrotreatment experiments and catalyst testing. So the terms of reference will be made available on the record website very, very soon, and interested parties are welcome to react and to send us this feedback. Given the short time, we'll stop it here, but of course we are available to respond to questions or any interesting element that is submitted through the chat. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, David. We have one more in the panel to go. Thomas Helmar Pedersen for refinery. And so we have more than 250 participants, and I would like them to continue asking questions in the Q&A, because the panelist is efficient in answering the questions. So keep filling them up. And Thomas, go.
Thank you very much, Preben. You can hear me, you can see me, you can see my presentation.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. So, yeah, my name is Thomas Helmar. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Energy Technology at AAU. But today I will represent the project called Full Refinery, which has the very short title of scenarios for integration of bioliquids in existing refinery processes. So the overview of the Full Refinery is like this. It started out in 17, so it almost finished now. It consists of 8 partners for what you will call primary fuel conversion. The project actually has 2 legs, not just HTL, but also pyrolysis. And then the project also has partners to take these bioliquids into existing refineries and in assessing operating strategies and so on. And then finally, as many other projects, we're also looking into TEAs, LCA, building up a toolbox for assessing different implementation routes. And then finally, hopefully, we can suggest multiple value chains for implementing such bioliquids. Now, my presentation, of course, during the seminar here will focus mostly on the HTL activities. I must say that even though I'm presenting it, the project is actually coordinated by SINTEF. But because I'm involved in the HTL activities, that is the reason. So a high-level overview of the activities in the Full Refinery project. We do HTL biocrude production in our pilot units at the university. You could see it from Lasse's presentation. Then we're taking different approaches to this biocrude. We have investigated standalone hydrotreatment of the bulk oil. We have looking into different co-processing strategies. One is to do biocrude distillation prior to upgrading. Another one is to do partially upgrading of the biocrude, mixing it with rapeseed oil. And then we have also been looking into hydrocracking of the bulk biocrude. And I will briefly touch on some of the opportunities and challenges that we have faced during the project. So first of all, without going too much into details with HTL, I would like just to point your attention to the carbon balance. So in an optimum HTL setting, we can recover about 70% of the carbon in the biocrude. The remaining carbon mostly go to the gas phase, with CO2 being the primary product. And the biocrude in this setting is also nearly upgradable. It has a low water content. It has low inorganics content. And even though we call it a crude oil, you would think that's what happens then if you distill. But due to the residual oxygen content, which is in the about 10%, the crude oil is still very volatile. And if you do a distillation followed by vacuum distillation, you will recover something about 55% of the carbon, or vice versa of the total, and then you will still have 45% in a vacuum residue, which is not very feasible. So what you could do then is to do a bulk hydrotreating to remove the majority of the oxygen, and that would make the biocrude much more volatile, and that is resembled in the bottom of this slide here. And so what you can see is that you can move a lot of the carbon from the residue to the distillate fraction. And by doing so, you can have about 50% of the total carbon from the biomass actually in the distillate fraction. Of course, this is an opportunity, but also this is the most expensive way, at least in terms of hydrogen consumption. The other alternative to do bulk processing is to do co-processing. But the first thing you will face here is a blend wall. We looked into how HTL biocrudes blend with different other renewables, such as rapeseed oil, but also standard refinery streams. We looked into gas oils, bunker fuels, and what we see is that they don't blend very well, or actually they don't blend at all. And we actually also see that some HTL biocrudes, they even don't blend. So in order to ease the integration of these bioliquids to a refinery, we can do several things. We approach the distillation. You can see from the pictures here that when we start doing distillation, now these, I don't know if I have a cursor here. Maybe I can do it like this, so pointer option here. The lighter fractions, and the distillates, they become actually blendable with straight run gas oil. And from distillation, we found that about 25% of the bulk biocrude can actually be blended with gas oil. Of course, that is the opportunity. The drawback is that you're still facing 75% of the bulk biocrude that needs or that you have to treat otherwise. But nevertheless, what we investigated is, so what happens with these 25% if you blend them in gas oil? So we did continuous hydrotreating with a 5% blend of these HTL distillates in straight run gas oil. The main objective was to do desulfurization and to make sure that we could still guarantee the specifications of the diesel fraction. And the main conclusion is that we can. The diesel is still on spec, which is again the opportunity. The drawback here is that the diesel yields, they drop. We could slightly see some catalyst deactivation. The hydrogen consumption increases significantly, it nearly doubled. And then the other thing, which is a practical issue, is that we see more impurities in the hydrogen loop, which, you know, in consequence might be that you need to purge more hydrogen. But definitely, distillation could be a way to integrate these liquids to a refinery. Another way is to do partial upgrading. We did a study to see how low you actually have to take the biocrude in oxygen content for this to be blendable. We found that somewhere between 7 and 2% is the sweet spot of hydrogen, where this partially upgraded biocrude will become blendable with gas oils and with the rapeseed oil. So we also tested this in a continuous hydrotreater. Now here the objective was not desulfurization, but deoxygenation. And to our conclusion is that deoxygenation is actually feasible, and we can remove most of the oxygen from this blend. Again, this was a 5% blend, but you can see from the pictures here that there might be other challenges such as phase separation and emulsification of the products. But anyway, they can be treated simultaneously. It's the same catalyst. Technical barriers, of course, they are there, but there are definitely also opportunities in going for the partial upgrading pathway. Before I go to my conclusion, I would say that I don't think there is a silver bullet in integrating HTL biocrudes into a refinery. I would say in the end, the business case determines where it goes, but also in the setting. So is this going to be implemented into a grassroots refinery? Is it a revamp, or is it a reuse of let's say old units in a refinery? But I am happy to take questions on this as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. there's not much time for questions, but fortunately, most of the questions have already been answered. There's still one for you in the Q&A tab, which is also for HTL producers concerning integration into refineries. Most of the refinery processes require very low levels of catalysts, poisons, as the processes have been designed to be online for many years. How low, high is the typical level of contaminants?
Well, I would say for this particular oil, which is from lignocellulosics, the amount of inorganics is a few hundred ppm. So you would typically think about a guard catalyst to take these inorganics, but it's impossible to remove them completely.
Thank you. I would also like to hear if there are questions between the panelists. Then we have a few minutes for that as well. Any questions from some of the panelists to some of the other panelists? Then remember to turn on your microphone. Does not seem to be the case. Then
if I may, I have it's not a question, it's more a comment and a follow-up to what Thomas was saying, and in answer to Stephen. This is a really good question, because this is one of the challenges that I was also alluring to with this the product separation, and it really is crucial that you do that you have a sufficient understanding of where it is you want to take your biocrude to actually make sure that you remove contaminants, and depending on the feedstock, as Thomas was saying, for lignocellulosics, it's not a lot, but it can still be of the order of, let's say, I don't know, 1,000 ppm or so, and you need to go lower. So this is an issue, and this is something that we are working on.
It's good to hear that it is being addressed. I've heard from 5 interesting Horizon 2020 projects now, and both on various feedstocks, various processes, various temperatures, and also batch and continuous operation. But still, in the lab, most of it. A quick round for the panelists. Will HTL have a significant contribution towards the European 2030 targets, or are we more looking into the 2050 targets? If we could.
Okay, well, let me start.
Anton.
Now, the thing is, I wanted to ask now a question to Thomas. Maybe he can say it. What his thinking is about the economics of cold liquefaction compared to standalone upgrading, and maybe another comment to the contaminants. So in high-flex fuel, we have looked into the options for HTL crudes from lignocellulosic biomass, but also sewage sludge and algae. And there you find different contaminants, and this also then gives you some different maximum blending rates that you could achieve. So towards the 2030 goals, I would say there is a chance, and my feeling at the moment is there's these two ways. One is you have the specific feedstocks that are especially suited for HTL, like the food waste and the sewage sludges, and there you are in the waste management system also concerning your revenues. So I really see there's a commercial perspective, but then the question is, what is your service? Are you treating wastes? Are you destroying micropollutants and such things, which also counts towards the Green Deal calls? Or are you then really a fuel production technology? So, and then if you go to the large amount of fuel production, your high potential is in the lignocellulosics, the residues, and the agricultural feedstocks. And there, of course, it depends whether HTL processes can really compete with the other options to produce advanced fuels from lignocellulosic materials. So I really believe that we will see this kind of fuels, but then the question is what technology it will be.
May I add a small comment on that? Thank you. Well, video is not switching on, but okay. Yeah, I agree with what has been said. Just wish to make a final remark on these contaminants. We should not have an HTL-centered view only. What we call contaminants elsewhere are nutrients. And so my question also to myself, I mean, as a researcher, is which is the appropriate feedstock for this technology? Not just because it's wet or whatever, but because HTL offers advantages to other competing uses. Even if we all work also on organic waste in HTL or algae, personally, I have some concern that these are the right feedstock for a fuel production. They could go on many other applications that are also of very high value, are tremendously needed, and are in line with the EU Green Deal call completely. And not just the energy part. I refer to the farm to fork, to other parts of the Green Deal. So even if this can fit very well to HTL, this does not necessarily mean that is the right approach. It could be. It depends on many factors. So I just want to remark that in carrying out this kind of evaluation, we should have a broad view on all the different options and possible applications, and really to identify where we honestly offer in a competitive advantage to other technological pathways.
Thank you. I agree. The HTL has non-energy benefits that is important for it to be competitive, and it's not just on the energy agenda that it is offering things. It's also on the broader circular economy scale. And we saw the timeline for these 5 projects. Some of them have a year or 2 still to go. Others are in the final years. But I'm sure that we'll see more HTL projects coming up in the next horizon period, and also on national scales. I hope tomorrow to be able to announce a new consortium on an initiative on HTL derivatives for fuels and green hydrogen for heavy transportation, looking on the whole value chain. So that is a cliffhanger here, where I'll say thank you to the panelists, and I will also say thank you to the organizers. And now there will be a short break before the next session starts at 15:45 for those of you who are participating there as well. Chiara, do you have a few final words?
Yes, thank you everybody for joining today, for your very interesting presentations, and thank you, Pregram, for your great moderation. And so we'll see you in less than 30 minutes for the second session. And thank you again. Thank you. Bye.